right, Merts, welcome to the CineMerts Podcast. We're Max Coulson and Levi Johnson. We're a couple of guys who like films, going to talk about films, talked about a film, and then there was some more films, and we're going to talk about them as well.
And the film we are going to be talking about today is Darkman.
Yes, the Sam Raimi, lesser-known Sam Raimi superhero film, to say the least.
Yeah, the one I never heard of.
I still am baffled by that. I mean, you are about the biggest fan of the Spider-Man trilogy that I know.
Yeah, I love all of them, even the third one.
Yeah, I mean, same. In fact, I was defending the third one back when no one was defending the third one.
Yeah, I wasn't doing that. I was definitely hating on that movie. I was hating on it for a long time.
But yeah, anyway, Darkman. A little backstory on the film. It was actually Sam Raimi had wanted to make a Batman movie for some time. It looked like he was going to be able to, and then, well, they gave it to Tim Burton, and
what a letdown that was.
Right.
He just decided to make his own thing. And for the best, I think, because Darkman I really enjoy. It's a very Sam Raimi movie with all the trappings and a lot of the faults, but by the same token, so fucking enjoyable.
Yeah, it's really fun to kind of watch him more or less just be like, yeah, I can do what I want with this. There's not like any kinds of parameters set for me, so I'll do what I want and it's going to be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can deal with that.
Yeah, it's a very simple movie, which is not in any way a criticism. I actually love how simple it is. I made some notes and I actually wrote that the script was very functional. And it really is. Everything just drives you to the next plot point. There's really no wasted time. There's no little character moments that don't lead to everything. Everything leads to the next thing. It's all very straightforward.
I think that's one thing I would maybe say. There's like no character moment. They're like, hey, here's a guy, and I'm pretty sure he's in love with this girl. Anyway, no time for that. Time for the Darkman, and that's basically it. It's like...
yeah, more or less. Yeah, it's very straight to the point. I don't know. Personally, I kind of like that because I feel like for a movie like this, I feel like slow moments would kind of maybe drag it down a little bit.
Yeah.
There's a certain fun that comes with just having this pure insanity all the time. I mean, it definitely... It opens with maybe one of the most over-the-top opening sequences of any movie.
Yeah, I was not expecting the opening to go anywhere the way it did. Spoilers for what is a very old movie.
Yeah.
I don't know when it came out. It starts off with like these guys doing a bit of a gangster trade deal. And then, surprise, the guys with no weapons are like, this guy had a wooden leg, and that wooden leg was actually a machine gun.
That's wielded by somebody else.
Oh, yeah. Somebody else, like, dies on the floor, grabs his leg, and then is like, surprise, and starts gunning everyone down.
And my favourite detail of that is that the other guy is hopping up and down on one leg.
Almost like he wasn't expecting it. Like, he was just surprised, like, wait, my leg's a gun now?
There's a great little moment right at the end of that shooting scene where he's hopping up and down after all the shootings ended, and the guy that was using his leg as a gun puts his arm out for him to balance with. It's just... It definitely lets you in for the sort of tone of the movie in general.
Yeah, the movie is very fun. It feels like a 90s superhero movie film. A lot of the time I kept thinking of like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles a lot. Heck, the Darkman's own costume. I wrote down TMNT trench coat logic because that's a thing. But maybe we should do a plot synopsis as to what the story. In case I never heard of the movie. Did you hear of the movie?
It's a very good point. So, okay, plot's it's a very simple movie. So there's this character Peyton who's played by I've just forgotten his name, Liam Neeson. Qui-Gon Jinn himself. And
sorry, I've got to ask you something. What are midi-chlorians? So, random jokes. Okay. Watch the movie.
Right. So Peyton is a scientist who is working on an artificial skin. The artificial skin in daylight after whatever it is.
99
minutes.
Very specific.
Yeah. That comes into play later, but basically his girlfriend is
some lady who works for like a dude who's a city contractor or something.
It's kind of never made super clear what her role really is, but either way, she has a document that shows that her boss is working with criminals. Her boss then, I don't know if this is supposed to be a twist, but it's not. Her boss then sends those criminals to not really to burn down the lab. They do burn down the lab, but they take the documents which are at the lab.
You know what's even weirder? And there's many things that are weird about that whole thing. One, how do they know that he had the documents? Two, why did they not just destroy the documents? Three, why'd they burn down the lab? They could have just asked for the documents.
There are so many weird questions surrounding it. It doesn't make a huge amount of sense, but
that's kind of
gets
the charm. Yeah, it's the fun of it. It's like, these guys are the bad guys, and they're going to do a dickhead thing.
Yeah, and it gets the plot moving. They destroy the lab, they burn it down, and in the process burn Peyton's skin off, basically, which he then gets taken to the worst hospital on Earth.
Hey man, what hospital doesn't have a large spinning, rotating gyro machine? Like, he's a burn victim, and he can't feel anything. Watch me stab him with this pin. Like, why would you do that, you bitch?
It wouldn't be anywhere near as funny were it not for the fact that he's clearly conscious as this is happening. They've apparently made no attempt to move towards like skin grafts or anything. They're just leaving him spinning in a gyro.
But they do explain that now that he's lost all these nerve endings and can't feel pain, the brain needs to find sensation. So that means you now have super strength. Yep, that's how it works.
Yeah, of course. Obvious. It also is mentioned that it leads to fits of rage because the emotions overwhelm him.
Yes.
And again, this very much comes into play later when the script remembers.
In the most inappropriate of times.
He escapes from the hospital, presumably during a fit of rage. It's not made overly clear. He just kind of wakes up and runs away, tries to approach his girlfriend, Julie, who freaks out because he was kind of wrapped in bandages, moaning like Frankenstein, all creepily grabbing at her, and amazingly that didn't really pan out well. So he runs off to some random warehouse, rebuilds his lab in the warehouse, and basically he tries to recreate his own face, which, because the picture he used was damaged, meant that it would take whatever it was.
Yeah, 571 hours to reconstruct his face, even though all he was doing was grafting one side of his face onto the other side.
Yeah, like, it's a copy and paste.
Yeah, basically. It was a copy and paste job.
What's weird about that is, while this is going on, he takes photos of the criminals that burnt his lab down and proceeds to make copies of, using the artificial skin, of their faces. And he's able to do this while they're still while the computer's still handling the copy paste of one side of his face. The internal logic is
I find it fascinating that the copy paste takes longer than just the scanning of a whole face
from multiple photos as well. It's very confusing. He starts to trick the gang by mimicking their faces and basically getting them into situations with each other. The first one is a guy who is supposed to make a cash pickup. He makes the pickup instead, and then plants plane tickets in his pocket to make it seem like he did a runner with the money. This all happens within the span of about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
it's
He's like, here's the money. Okay, we want the money back now. Like, what? He's like, I never made the pickup. I'm sorry, boss. I was asleep. So such a bizarre. It's so bizarre how that lined up. I was like, oh, it's going to be like the next day or so. No, it's just happening right now.
Time works very strangely in this movie. So basically, he tricks them, a lot of just little creating misunderstandings to, he gets the leader arrested briefly, and then I don't really know what his plan is with that because it gets botched. He sort of creates a mask of the gang leader, gets him arrested, and then does a deal as him while he's still dealing with the police. But because he gets caught partway through, we never actually find out what his plan is beyond that point.
Yeah.
And the story never revisits it. So
he was after the money, but then didn't need the money? Because I was like, maybe he needs more money for the face mask materials. No?
It's never established where that comes from. There's so much that isn't established, to be honest, as far as any of that goes. Also, the film does operate on a weird sort of internal logic where he has the full body shape of the person whose mask he's wearing. Even when it's like a fat guy, he just immediately becomes that person.
Hey, man.
And it's fine.
They're like, yeah, we're using face masks, but really, we're just swapping the actor.
Yeah. What's weird is they do make the effort to show him trying to imitate their voices.
Yeah.
So acknowledges that hurdle, but not that they have completely different body shapes.
Like, surely they'll be like, Paulie, you seem to have lost a lot of weight there.
Face is sagging. Picking on little, I don't know, flaws like that. Kind of, it's fun to do, but at the same time, this is a cartoon.
Yeah, like, the film isn't trying to be some type of, how are we going to write it so that no nerd on the internet could ever pick apart, anything that goes wrong. It's like, hey man, I did a movie and it's fun to watch and, enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
That's kind of the point, and I think it does succeed in that aspect of being a movie.
I've noticed, as someone who's seen, I think, close to every Sam Raimi movie, is he has never been big on explaining things. If you go back to The Evil Dead, there is a very brief explanation of what the demons are, but how they work, the internal logic is never explained, and that's a lot of where the horror comes from. And then that's doubled in the sequels, which are more comedy. In the Spider-Man movies, again, there's never really any detail paid to anything.
That's probably why there's no web shooters, man.
Yeah, they're just organic because
it makes more sense. God damn it! Like, it's actually better. I'm going back. Levi, in 2001, you were wrong. The web shooters suck. It's really annoying. How does Peter Parker afford this expensive chemical-like stuff to make web shooters? Just make it organic.
Yeah. Sam Raimi movies always operate on their own logic. To take it back to Spider-Man, that's a movie where apparently the way wrestling matches work is that random people just show up and they're just thrown in a cage match.
Yeah, they're not worked fights. They're all real, and some dude did get serious spinal injuries.
It's just because these are cartoons. His movies are always like this.
Which, to be fair, I think works very well, like, for comic book movies.
Absolutely. I think the unfortunate legacy of films like, really, the Dark Knight trilogy, and I'm not saying this as someone who disliked those movies. The third one sucked, but the first two, I think, are good movies. But their legacy has unfortunately been that superhero movies have to be a bit more respectable than that. The MCU has had good movies, sure. In fact, I'd say probably has had more good movies than bad movies.
Yeah, I'll agree.
But at the same time, a lot of that fun element, pure dumb fun element has been lost. And I do wonder, as far as what's there for like kids now. And I'm not saying Darkman is a kids movie because it's not. It's quite gory. But it operates like a kids movie. It has that same comic book logic. I mean, I did watch it as a kid and I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, and it's not a movie that I would have. I remember being a kid. I was terrified of anything horror, or stuff that was too violent. Nope, big no for me. But I think even as a kid, I would have been fine with Darkman.
Yeah. I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, but I do think it links into a wider point. When Venom came out a while back, I remember everyone complained about that movie. And I'm not saying it doesn't have its flaws. But one of the biggest gripes I noticed that people had with it was that it didn't feel like what current superhero movies feel like. I.e., something that links into a wider world, something that's a little bit more grounded, something that feels a bit more fleshed out. What it felt like was a throwback movie. It felt like a movie made in the 90s that's just, we sort of read a comic book and, we got the vague idea. Here's just a bit of fun for a couple of hours or an hour and a half or whatever. And you don't have to think about it. And it's an interesting thing that people really don't want that anymore.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder where movies like Darkman and like the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, and, even movies like The Phantom and stuff like that, where they stand in the current climate of superhero movies, whether they're...
I'll tell you where they stand. They don't.
Here's the thing, though. I would sooner watch most of those movies than rewatch any Marvel movies, and that's acknowledging that they're good. It's just because when you're in a current sort of cultural movement, it's easy to get sick of it. When you're more detached from it, you can kind of see the charms of it a little more. I think that's a lot of what nostalgia is.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I do think there's more to some of these movies than there is than just nostalgia.
This is the first time I saw Darkman, and I thought it was a really enjoyable watch. Half of me is now like, damn, I'm half on a point, but we are also actually on a hugest tangent from doing this plot summary.
I forgot we were doing I suppose we did summarize the bulk of the movie.
Well, yeah, I guess from what, that last gang thing, he basically just does that until he meets up with the final guy, and then does the "I'm gonna kill you," and he does.
Yeah, I actually really like that end sequence.
Yes. Wait! Don't go into the end sequence though. Okay. Not yet.
It's very separate to the current wave of superhero films. I actually feel uncomfortable calling Marvel films superhero films, but comic book movies.
All the Marvel films have this problem for me in nobody ever saves anyone or stops really a crime. So I find it very difficult to call anyone actually a superhero. Yeah. They're superpowered individuals who happen to fight maybe another superpowered individual.
Yeah.
But it's something I find awkward. Like Spider-Man, at least he got some scenes where he stops a mugging. So he feels like a superhero to me. Same with like in the Batman, the Dark Knight trilogy, he does stop some low-level crimes. If you only ever fight the high-level big bad, it doesn't feel like a superhero film to me.
Mm-hmm. Although by the same token, it'd actually be kind of dishonest to really call Darkman a superhero movie. It's more of a revenge movie.
Yes.
It has more in common with something like The Crow than it does with something like Spider-Man.
Yeah. It's weird though, because the film, you can very see a lot of proto Spider-Man. I noticed a lot of scenes where I was like, this is proto Spider-Man. Heck, I saw Spider-Man 3, where he swings flying up and he goes up to the building where he sees his reflection.
Mm-hmm.
That happens because when that moment where Darkman is swinging from the helicopter, he comes up towards the building in the essentially exact same shot. I was like, this is all they needed in that scene was a reflection of Spider-Man, and this was Spider-Man 3.
Yeah. There's a lot of moments like that. There's moments very reminiscent of the Doc Ock transformation sequence. Which in itself is kind of reminiscent of Evil Dead. It's just a very Sam Raimi way of directing.
There's what's that scene where there are the specific flashes that then reveals the skull, which is exactly felt the same as when Spider-Man was first bitten by the spider and he's collapsing onto the floor and they start flashing and panning over a lot of stuff and bam, like here it is. It's like,
the weird kind of flashy editing happens a lot in this. They're kind of usually the preludes to his fits of rage is done in an incredibly stylistic way.
Yeah, I actually quite like how it's done. Like as it slightly starts going weird, they mess with the color grading.
There's one particular scene in the carnival scene, which in general is my favourite scene in the entire movie. They go to Sam Raimi land, where everything's creepy and off-putting and weird. And also feels like it's a carnival from the 1800s, where they have freak shows and old school rides, and nothing feels modern in the slightest. But there is a moment where he's trying to win a pink elephant, or he does win a pink elephant, and at a ball throwing carnival game, and the carny won't give him it. He's saying he's over the line. The typical trope of the scumbag carny type character, played in the most non-committal way possible. But he has a fit of rage there, while we're seeing very close-up shots of a carnival teller shouting, "Look at this freak of nature! He's a freak!" And this leads to a fit of rage, which is done in this really cool way, where everything starts to crack, first from his point of view, but then the background behind him begins to crack and fall away into a different background, like kind of flames. And then there's this harsh zoom in on his eye, zooms out of the other eye. It's very hyper stylized, and I really enjoy it.
I think it would have been interesting, let's say, in an alternate universe where Sam Raimi was given basically all of the Marvel cast. I could see that being, oh, get ready, Lou Ferrigno's about to show up, like he's becoming the Hulk. I could see that being his stylized transformation.
Yeah.
I think it would have worked quite nicely, actually, for like a Bruce Banner losing control moment.
To be honest, I know I keep going back to the MCU as this weird point of reference, but it's hard not to, given that this is effectively a comic book movie, even if it's not directly based on an actual comic book. That level of stylization, that level of daring kind of editing and weird off-putting ways of shooting things, it wouldn't fit within a cinematic universe where you've got to make it feel like it fits with 50 other movies. And I feel like if there's one thing that's really genuinely severely lacking from a lot of just Hollywood films in general today, it's that unwillingness to take risks cinematically. And the reason for that, I think, is because of the almost fetishization of the cinematic universe. It's not just Marvel. DC have tried and failed multiple times now.
Yeah.
You've got Legendary doing it with the kind of Kong and Godzilla universe thing.
Yeah.
They tried to do it with the Universal monster movies, like relaunching those in a cinematic universe.
Yeah, that was weird. Well,
again, failed horribly.
I'll say, aren't they technically one of the oldest examples of a shared universe?
Yeah, they
are. For a brief moment, they had like, the Wolfman and Frankenstein's monster, and Swamp Thing for some reason.
Yeah, and they did have crossover movies and all that.
But it was not the same kind of level, obviously, as today. But I get what you're saying. This bizarre brand homogenization, where everything kind of has to fit together, which is one of the reasons why it's surprising that James Gunn's done so all right with the Guardians movies, in all honesty.
I think the reason he was able to is because they're so detached, and I mean that in terms of physical space. They're so detached from the rest of the MCU that he could take a few more risks. I'd also say that about Taika Waititi with the third Thor movie, which I can't remember the name of, Ragnarok. Again, that's a little bit more distinct. Hey, future version of Max here. One thing I realised that I'd completely forgotten while we were actually recording was that Sam Raimi was also going to be at the helm of the new Doctor Strange movie. So, yeah, just thought I'd bring that up as well, because that's kind of relevant here. And also, yeah, I'm kind of excited about that. I wasn't that keen on the first one. Thought, it was a little bit bland. I know people talked about the visuals, but to me it just sort of felt a little bit like Inception. So I'd be very interested to see how he brings his visual flair to Doctor Strange, especially considering that this new one is supposed to be a bit more horror tinged. So you occasionally see flashes of it, but you could never get anything as daring as what Raimi did, even in the Spider-Man movies, let alone with something like Darkman, which is a lot weirder in terms of how it's presented, even in the Spider-Man films. There's actually, I even wrote it down, but there's this amazing transition that I think sums up everything I love about Sam Raimi as a director. Right after the lab blows up, Julie is looking up at the lab. She's about to go in, because it's also where they live, I guess. And she's looking up at the lab, and it explodes. And Peyton flies up out of the lab in a very terrible green screen effect. So parts of this movie don't feel like they've really aged because they're so stylized, and then other moments just, the technology was not there. Certainly not with the budget that he was working with. But right after the labs explode, she's just staring up at it. And then it transitions to her at the funeral. But the way it happens is that the funeral, the black garb that she's wearing kind of morphs over her, and the shot morphs into, or slowly fades into the funeral. It's a really well done shot. Really clever edit. And those types of weird transitions, weird editing choices is what I love about Sam Raimi. I like directors who have a mark on their movies. I think I even made that joke while we were watching it. I actually said, "Can you tell this is a Sam Raimi movie?" Yeah. And I love that. To have a director who, it's one of their movies just without having seen any credits, you could just know it was one of their movies.
Yeah.
There aren't that many directors who are that good that you can do that with. There's sort of only really a handful. I'd say Tarantino is definitely one.
Yeah. When you just know, like, oh, this is one of their movies, I can tell because of the dialogue, the editing, etc.
Tarantino's a little harder just because he's been imitated by every indie filmmaker on Earth.
Yeah.
Whereas no one's ever really tried to imitate Sam Raimi. I think anyway, because his style's so throwbacky and hokey, he's very rooted in the golden age of Hollywood. Really pre-golden age. We're talking like, mention the Universal monsters. Really, that's a big influence on him. You can definitely see like the sort of Boris Karloff, Frankenstein moments in this. You can see the kind of Phantom of the Opera, the original Phantom of the Opera. There's a lot of that type of tragic monster type storytelling, which he also used in Spider-Man.
Something I would think that's actually a bit of a shame. I actually think the Darkman character could hold its own like little comic book movie series or like set of books. I really like the actual character design. Even though he's actually rarely in the full Darkman garb for an actual extended period.
Yeah, they rely more heavily on the masks.
Yeah, because
that whole thing.
he wears like bandages across his face and body, but he's got like, again, going back to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, he's wearing a trench coat and it's got like the what's that, like trilby fedora. Yeah,
I don't really know.
He's got one of those old timey hats. Think of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Thinking about it, I think it might be a Stetson.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's rocking with like that kind of a look, and I just think to myself, this would work really well as a superhero series. He's already got like some powers. He's not ridiculously overpowered, so you could see this after this movie. We go on, maybe he fights some crimes, does some things, but then he uses the mask generation technology so that he can infiltrate gangs, do other stuff. So he is kind of a Batman, but he's also like, a bit of like the chameleon, I guess, or like Clayface if you're going with that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I could see it being quite interesting. Using the alternate faces is a interesting power that you don't normally see heroes get.
Especially with the that limitation of the 99 minutes. Because it means that it can't be used to a ridiculous degree. He has to do a lot of planning to make it work. And actually, this is one area where I think a slower movie could benefit from this character, or a slower narrative. Something more detective-based.
Yeah. I definitely think this could go into like a bit of a franchise. I could see somebody like pulling this out and being like, "Hey, well, now how are we going to do this?" Almost Ocean's 11, where they go, "How are we going to break in, guys? Like, let's make a plan." And he's there, like, infiltrating gangs, and he's like, "I only got this much time to discuss with the Queen of Sheba." I don't know.
I've never looked into it to see if there actually were any comics. There might have been comics since it was released. I mean, Christ, like Dark Horse will put anything out. So there's, I mean, they did the Evil Dead comics. I'm pretty sure that was that Dark Horse run. Highlander, a lot of like cult movies have had comic book series. Some of them very popular and successful. Buckaroo Banzai, a lot of these movies have like pretty cult following comics. So it's entirely possible Darkman has. I've genuinely never looked into it. I think there may have been sequels, but they were like direct to video crap. Like I don't think there was anything theatrically released.
Maybe we should tweet at Sam Raimi and be like, "Dude, do you want to do this again? Because could be a thing."
Hey, you can listen to us. We nearly made a movie once. We know what we're talking about. Be fair, we nearly made a movie twice.
Yes.
Making movies is hard. Finishing movies is incredibly hard. Okay, so the end scene I really love. It's very typical comic book superhero movie type setup, really. High building, high stakes. What I really like is that usually in these types of setups, the hero's at way more of an advantage. If you look at anything, Spider-Man, Batman, they will do this, but I mean, these are characters that are good on high buildings. These are characters that are effortlessly swinging around, effortlessly jumping from building to building. Whereas in this, the villain is effortlessly jumping around on scaffolding the size of a skyscraper.
Because he gets like surprise backstory right at the end. And he's like, "My dad used to make me work on these skyscrapers as a kid." What?
I had a terrible father. But he is jumping around on the scaffolding effortlessly. Whereas Peyton Darkman, whatever, is he's stumbling, he's struggling to keep balance, right up until the point he teleports to a higher up beam and drops down on the villain with zero explanation as to how he got above him.
But that's like his special move as well. The send down, drop pounce.
He does it several times, yeah.
That is his actual special move.
I think this is kind of Raimi leaning on his horror roots a little bit. He definitely seemed to like doing that, using that element of fear. And maybe also the fact that obviously originally he was planning to make a Batman movie. Yeah. And that does seem like a Batman move. I mean, you ever played Arkham, dropping down on people, that's pretty standard Batman move.
I did notice that at the end in this final sequence, there is this kind of weird foreshadowing, like, not within the movie, but within more cinema. Maybe somebody watched this movie, maybe a Christopher Nolan watched this, because at the end, they are on a skyscraper, and then they drop a dude off of, like, the skyscraper, and he is connected to a cable. I was like, what? Like, is this like the Dark Knight here? Like, yes, I know, like, it's partly meant to be aping the fact that in the Tim Burton Batman, like, they dropped him off a building. But still, maybe it was Darkman. I actually thought it was pretty cool. Again, I'm going to go back to saying Proto Spider-Man, because then they have his girlfriend get dropped off of this skyscraper as well. And when Darkman goes to grab her, they are trying to stop him. I was expecting a load of New Yorkers to show up and be like, hey, what you think you're doing? Trying to beat up a guy, trying to save a bunch of kids?
Leave Darkman alone.
You mess with one of us. You mess with all of...
Yeah. I don't know what city this is.
New Yorkers stick together. That's lesson on that one.
Yeah, and in whatever the hell city Darkman's set in, I'm sure that might also be true, but it's hard to say because the movie does not explain anything ever.
Like how he's like, I'm building a new city, which you were like, wait, is this the city from RoboCop? Like,
I swear the model looks just like the Delta City model.
But then, like after like talking to him, he's like, yeah, but come on, Julie, you know what I was doing. And he opens up like some of the blinds, and then the city's just like nearly built.
This is in... I mean, again, I mentioned this earlier, but time moves very strangely in Darkman. It's unclear what the passage of time has been. It's probably been a few months, because there is the time frame given for making his facial reconstruction.
Yeah, which is about 20 odd days.
Yeah. Then there's the fact that he was in a coma for some amount of time that is completely unspecified. Long enough for him to have been buried. But, you know, that can vary wildly, so really near impossible to say. I do find it funny, though, that there was clearly no body in that building, but they were just like, yeah, he's dead.
No, the dude's like, they didn't find enough of him. They only found it here.
Yeah, generally speaking, people don't disintegrate.
Yeah, but the explosion was really powerful. I also found it amusing that his friend didn't get a funeral.
Yeah, well, he's just forgotten about.
And how, for some reason, that's what the bad guy's thing was. He's like, collect their fingers.
Yeah, like, it's weird. It's introduced in the first scene, the chopping off fingers. But it's at first you're just led to assume he uses a cigar cutter, and it's just there to torture this rival gang leader. But then, when they blow up the lab, he also goes, get the Asian's fingers.
Why?
Yeah.
Don't you want Darkman's fingers as well? Like, what?
I was going to address the elephant in the room. I think Sam Raimi might hate Asian people. The lab assistant is completely forgotten about the second he's dead. The movie is just like, brushes him to one side, he's dead, that's it. The next time we see an Asian person, it is the most stereotypical human being on Earth in the Chinese restaurant.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about
Hello,
that.
Robert.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I actually was like, make a mental note to be like, really? Is this drawn together here? Where he's like, oh, look, it's Plur. It's like, Prel?
It's pretty bad.
Yeah.
It is actually pretty bad. Sam Raimi's always leaned on stereotypes. Let's not forget Bruce Campbell as the French waiter. In which Spider-Man was that one? 3. Bruce Campbell does get a cameo in this, by the way, right at the very end. He has no lines. He's just another mask that's been put on by Darkman.
which is weird because the Darkman mask generation doesn't seem to be able to make stuff up.
I mean, maybe he took a photo of Bruce Campbell at some point before. Maybe he had a copy of, I don't know, Army of Darkness, like... Army of Darkness on VHS.
That was something else that I was actually kind of surprised by. They kind of set up this fact that the mask obviously deteriorates in light.
Mm-hmm.
So he's Darkman because, he's going to stay in the dark. So I figured there would be like this whole thing where he's wearing masks and he's trying to get around by staying in the dark.
Yeah, no.
And they literally do not do that.
No. In fact, he exclusively wears the masks in the light.
Yeah.
And they just use that that time frame thing, which is very interesting because, one, why would he limit himself like that? Presumably gangs do things at night. So he could probably do shit at night. So that's one side of it. The other is he's called Darkman. I mean, I say that. The film's called Darkman. Nobody actually calls him Darkman in the movie.
Nope, he called himself Darkman right at the end. He's
right,
like, I am the Darkman.
Yeah.
Which, saying the Darkman made me think the Nightman, but keep going before we go into a tangent. Let's just go. Move past it. Go, quick.
So, I noticed a couple of times you laughing specifically because of the score.
Yes. I was like, is this Danny Elfman? And yes, it is. And sometimes, like, I actually really like Danny Elfman scores, but for this movie, a lot of the time it's like really triumphant, or uplifting, and maybe nothing really is happening, or like he's just like punching a dude, and I'm like, I maybe conveyed the wrong emotion at this point, but
there's a couple of moments as well where the score really starts to pick up during dialogue scenes, and it's like, this is a bit much.
I did find myself also constantly being reminded of Spider-Man at times, just going like, it's like watching Spider-Man. It's like I'm watching Spider-Man again. Every time. So, yeah.
He's an odd choice for any studio film, really.
That is actually pretty true.
He's so un-Hollywood. Which, again, I think there's something great about that. I always chalk it up as a win. When you get a studio budget movie... And I mean, this was a studio movie, in a sense, it was a Universal movie. It wasn't...
Yeah.
This wasn't an indie film. It was a smaller budget. It wasn't a blockbuster. But it was still a studio movie. And I always chalk it up as a win whenever you see a studio movie made by someone who's very un-Hollywood. And especially when they maintain those sensibilities.
Yeah, because, it also pushes the boundaries of what audiences expect. Damn, it's happened again. I do feel that the MCU has kind of trapped a lot of movie-going audiences into expecting, so this is what a movie is. I think a lot of people would be, quite put off a bit by, if you're not expecting, a Sam Raimi movie, they might be going, what the heck? Why is this editing so, this isn't how movies are edited? But that's kind of the point, because it has its own style and a different flavor. It evokes different feelings. And I think if you're too used to something and going, well, this is how you edit, you do this shot and then you do that shot, and then, you don't use the editing to change the pace of something and change how the actual flow or feeling of the shot. That's what happens on screen. I think that could be maybe off-putting if you're very only specifically into that one.
I think also people who are, because I mean, really, if we're talking about people who their sensibilities are that rooted within the modern the modern idea of really what an action movie in general is, because it's all so shaped by. There's really two things that have shaped the modern action movie. That's the MCU and Michael Bay.
Hey, wait a minute! Don't forget about the Bourne films.
Yeah,
they did that shaky cam.
Yeah, that's true, and ruined fight scenes forever. Yeah, people keep telling me how, no, it's different in Bourne, it's good in Bourne, because they actually choreograph the fights well. Okay, I still can't see them. To me, that's worse. That's just wasted effort. I think, if younger people whose sensibilities are rooted in the modern idea of an action movie, I think really any older action movie, but particularly a movie like this, where despite the fact that the editing is so unusual at points, despite how inventive it is, the action scenes move a lot, or feel a lot slower than, say, a modern action sequence, in the sense that things aren't shot as frenetically. They're not edited as frenetically. There aren't a million edits to every action scene. Now, I like that. I actually prefer being able to see the action.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of reliance on wide shots. There's a lot of...
I was just going to say, I actually prefer a wide shot that shows what's happening.
So do I. But the problem is, I think, for a lot of younger people, is it does make it feel less frenetic.
Yeah.
Which I feel like would have that niggling, this is boring, this is a boring scene. Which, granted, I feel like doesn't really apply too much to this movie, because it's hard to call a lot of what's going on in this movie boring.
Yeah.
When someone's hopping around while someone else is using their leg as a gun, or when someone's firing off random, like a grenade launcher into traffic on a freeway.
As part of a discreet cover-up.
And also blows up a police helicopter.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that earlier in that scene, that same man, the gang boss, gets arrested for holding up a convenience store.
Like,
and it's not really him. He gets framed. So it's like, okay, so this is set in a grounded enough universe that people have to keep a low profile. Oh, I guess not, because he just blew up a police helicopter in broad daylight and then started firing grenades into traffic.
The police helicopter was just flying around.
Oh, it was an incidental police helicopter that they just happened to pass.
Oh, this movie's amazing. Like, it's... I enjoy it so much. The bizarre tone that Raimi likes to come with. Like I said, there was that scene where Darkman swings towards a building reminiscent of Spider-Man. In that scene, he then smashes through the actual glass into the building, and then a load of people inside are just shocked, and he's like, whoops, sorry folks, and then just jumps back out, like, while he's in a battle to the death with a gang leader. Like, they just put this random joke in there. I was like, what? Like, it just feels like it's from a totally different movie. It felt almost like a Roger Rabbit.
Yeah, I think it was like right after that I actually said out loud while watching, this is a cartoon.
He's like running on the rooftop of like a car as he's holding on.
I actually love that way. Yeah, when he's running over, I think it's a lorry, and he runs over, and there's this shot of his legs running super fast over it, and it looks like something out of a cartoon. It looks like Wile E. Coyote. But it's great. It's not for everyone, and I think that is something that is going to be a motif in this podcast. Given that the sort of films that we're probably going to end up talking about 9 times out of 10. But I would also argue that the best films, all the best films, aren't for everyone, because films that are for everyone usually kind of bland.
Yeah.
Because a film for everyone is a film for no one in particular, which means a film that has very little identity. And once again, if there's one thing you could never accuse this movie of, it's having a lack of identity. It's not a forgettable movie.
Yeah.
It's funny. I mean, I've actually seen it twice quite close together recently, but I mean, I had gone years without seeing it, and I could remember every single scene. Because it sticks in your memory. It
leaves an impression. When you think back on it, it's so bizarre because the actual outline for the story is so simple, but you pretty much remember everything because it's so distinct.
Yeah, but that's something, and I've told you this before, like just in normal conversation, that a lot of my favourite movies are movies that have a very simple premise, but go above and beyond in the way they present that premise. That would go from everything from,
Schumer.
like, yeah, that's a prime example. The Warriors.
Oh yeah,
I would say is a prime example of that. Assault on Precinct 13. Classic movie, and again,
not so much the remake.
I've not actually seen the remake.
There is an amazing part where, what's his name? Lawrence Fishburne. Lawrence Fishburne rocks up with 2 Molotov cocktails, and this is the meme that me and my mates made up for ourselves. He rocks up, he's like, "There will be machines!" And he dashes a Molotov cocktail on one guy, and then while he's on fire, he dashes the other Molotov cocktail onto him. It's fucking awesome.
Simple movies that really deliver on their premise and really go above and beyond. I always really like the Crank movies.
Yeah.
They're about as simple as you can get. But, the way they move, and I mean, they are very frenetic in how they're edited and everything, but it's, again, they leave a mark. They're distinct.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. The worst crime to me a movie can commit is being forgettable. I would rather watch a bad movie than a forgettable movie. I would rather, I would rather be laughing at a movie's expense than bored by it. So, unsurprisingly, I'm not a big fan of the current state of Hollywood. And that's why I like going back and watching movies like this, man.
Yeah.
Like it's refreshing. It's like a throwback to when filmmakers had the freedom to do that.
Yeah, I'll say that there's like a daringness in their expression. They just go, I want to do this. No one else is doing it. Cool. Well, maybe it's going to catch on and then everyone will be doing it. Like, you don't know, like, unless you try. Like, let's see. You can't
get a movie like this when you focus group your audience.
Yes.
It's an unfortunate reality of the current system. Now, that's not to say there aren't good movies being made. That's not to say there aren't inventive movies being made, but they're pretty much exclusively indie films. And if they are made by studios, they're made by studios for places like, streaming services, things like that. They're not the major releases. Now, again, this wasn't a major release, but Sam Raimi did go on to do major releases. And I can't currently see any filmmaker who's as distinct as him being given the freedom to go on and work on projects as big as that. You could say someone like James Gunn, but it's not like he's given 100% freedom on Guardians. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's not like they're as distinct as something like Slither or Super. You know what I mean? As good as... And I enjoyed the Guardians movies. I really enjoy them.
Super is a fantastic movie.
Super is a very good movie. So much better than Kick-Ass.
Yes, it is what Kick-Ass wishes it was.
Yeah. Right, is there any other actual points I have to make?
I think
I've hit all my notes.
Yep, I know mine.
Okay, Ian Beale. I'm going to have to edit the fuck out of this.
Oh yeah. Structure. The two things that me and Max are really good at. We don't get distracted at all. That's not literally what both of us are known for.
We don't make movies and come up with a weird side gag where people walk the wrong way around rooms. And unnecessarily add weeks of production time because we've got a bunch of extraneous footage that I don't need and can't use.